All right, let's turn our attention to the SEC. Now, remember, one of the reasons why we're doing this exercise is because, quite frankly, the conferences have changed. Like the schools, we don't necessarily see the same old faces. There's some of them. Got Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. So the new look SEC. Isaac, when you take a look at those teams in the 2024-25 SEC, who is your favorite to win this year?
I'll take the team that finished top on KenPom last year and gets all their guys back in Auburn. I think this is a group that is arguably the best rim defense in the sport now that Donovan Clingan has left UConn. They finished just a hair behind UConn in rim defense last year. Team shot just 48% at the rim against Auburn, which is just nuts. And they're going to do a lot of those same things with Janai Broome and Dylan Cardwell back. And I'm really bullish on these year 2 transfer jumps from Denver Jones and Chad Baker-Mazara. Both of those two guys got a lot of experience in the starting lineup last year, and I think they're going to be a whole lot better as they take another step forward. JP Pegues out of Furman is awesome, but Georgia Tech transfer Miles Kelly, I think, has a chance to be one of the better value gets out of the portal. I think a lot of people looked at him and they're like, well, a high volume shooter, but the percentages just weren't great. He had to bail Georgia Tech out of a lot of possessions last year. I think the quality of shot that he gets at Auburn is going to be completely different. And Bruce Pearl's talked about it too. He's one of the best shooters that they've had in their program. So you give me a Janai Broome, who's an SEC Player of the Year candidate. You give me this stable of guards. You give me the defense that I know that they're going to play at the rim and their home court advantage. I think Auburn has a chance to be the best team in the league.
All right. Now let me ask you this. Who do you think is the deepest team in college basketball next year? I'll give you a hint because it's the team I'm picking. Best team in the SEC. I got to go with Alabama. I mean, how Nate Oates built this level of depth. I'm looking at this roster, and I just don't see who doesn't play. I mean, there's legitimately 12 or 13 guys on this roster who absolutely have to play. I mean, you're talking about either legitimate All-American candidates or legitimate NBA draft candidates at virtually every position on the floor. You've talked about Chris Youngblood and how you love him coming in as a grad transfer. I'm going to talk about Mark Sears in a little bit here because I think he's going to be one of the best guards in college basketball again this year. Then you add Cliff Amorie in the middle, like just a defensive monster. Talk about protecting the rim. Grant Nelson, the skilled big. You've got Jaren Stevenson, who I've talked about as a potential breakout guy. We're not even mentioning Mohamed Diabate yet, who's kind of like the defensive extraordinaire of this group. Darion Reed, you're hearing tremendous things about how he's acclimating so far as a freshman. Houston Mallette's another one. Like, not even talking about Naz Cunningham and Aiden Sherrill. Like, this is LeBaron Filan. Like, this is ridiculous. There's just too many guys. Like, call the inter-squad scrimmage the conference championship game. They are absolutely loaded. And here's the thing. We know two things about what Nate Oates is going to do. It's going to be an analytically driven approach, and it's going to be a creative offensive system that highlights all of these weapons. And when you have so many guys, it gives the coach the authority, if you will, or the leverage is the better word, to say, hey, you guys go battle it out. May the best man win, and that's who's going to get on the floor. I just think Alabama is absolutely loaded. This is the most talent Nate Oates has ever had, 1 through 13 on his roster.
And if he can weaponize this depth, I think that's the way to really elevate into a national title contender, because you can play big, you can play small. Like, you didn't even mention Aiden Holloway, who we still have very high hopes for.
That was an oversight on my part. Yeah.
I mean, that just shows you how loaded they are and kind of where they're at. But again, I'm all about like how they weaponize this. And what's your prediction of a starting lineup? For me, it's Sears with Youngblood, Darion Reed, Grant Nelson, and Cliff Amorie. Like, there's no doubt in my mind, if that's a starting lineup, that group is way better than 111th defensively, what they were last year. Like, that might be a top 15 to 20 defense.
So I think one of the subplots of Alabama this year is going to be the way that they choose to play. So I think initially you're going to see both of those big guys start together. Cliff and Grant are going to start the 4 and 5. I'm very curious to see if they stick with that, because we know how much Nate values shooting, and getting Jaren Stevenson at the lineup at the 4, I think is something that may inevitably happen over the course of the season. I mean, there's enough minutes there for everybody, or at least for those 3 guys. But that is going to be really interesting to me. I'm very interested to see how Holloway, like, Is he the backup point guard, or is Filan the backup point guard? I've heard a lot of good things about Filan, as I have about Darion Reed. Like, the intel out of Alabama in terms of what those two guys are doing so far has been very, very strong. And we know how you feel about Youngblood. So, like, we know Sears is going to start. We know Cliff is going to start. I think Darion's going to start. I think you have to start Grant, and then it's just Aiden or Youngblood, and I think probably it's Youngblood right off the bat. So that's my answer to your question. But I think that could really evolve, and it wouldn't surprise me if Stevenson is finishing games early on, and especially down the stretch of the season.
And that's their best NBA draft prospect that they're bringing off the bench. Like, yeah, they're loaded. They're loaded. Like that, like I said, like picking Auburn over Alabama is not a shot at Alabama. It's more of a, like, these two teams are tier 1 national title contenders and right
Agreed.
next to each other.
Agreed. They're both national championship contenders. All right, we're going to keep talking about these teams now, because we're going to talk about the best player in the conference. You have continued to go with someone from Auburn. I've continued to go with someone from Alabama. Talk to me about your pick.
Yeah, for me, it's Chani Broome, because I don't know what he does wrong. He really impacts the game on every single level. Elite rim protection, elite rim pressure. He can pass it. He now added a jumper. Like, he's an NBA player who's playing in college, and now he enters like year 5 in college. Like, we've seen big men who stay in college longer. Like, they just smash. Like, Auburn had a plus 20 net rating with him on the floor. Like, I think Broome could potentially challenge Zach Edey for having like a plus 25, plus 30 net rating when he's on the floor next year, especially when you factor in just all the shooting that Auburn has added in the portal and in their roster construction. So his ability just to beat you in post-ups, he can beat you from the mid-post, he can face up, spin, dribble, get into the middle of the paint for little floaters, gets the free throw line at will. Like, he just impacts the game on such a high level, especially defensively. Like, he's arguably one of the best defenders in college basketball too, and he's also awesome offensively. So just his two-way impact is pretty much the reason why I have him as the SEC Player of the Year. But you can't go wrong with Sears either.
Yeah, I think Mark Sears is going to be the best player in the conference. I mean, I think he's college basketball's Jalen Brunson. Quite frankly, that's not to say he's going to be Jalen Brunson in the NBA, but he may be undersized, but he is tough. He is skilled. And what really stands out to me is, for all the volume he played with last year, for all the tough shots he had to take, this guy shot over 51% from the floor and 44% from the three-point line. I mean, those are just ridiculous numbers for someone who had to take tough shots, because he buys into Oates' system. He puts pressure on the rim. He shoots threes. He's really expanded that part of his game in recent years. I think what's going to be interesting this year is, given the amount of weapons that are around him, we may have to see him evolve into more of a distributor and less of a shot maker. So that's going to be an interesting transition, and one that could ultimately pave a translatable role to his professional aspirations. But to me, he's the best player in the league. And I also think this year in college basketball, listen, it's been a game of giants for the last 2 years with Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan, and I think we're going to get back to a little bit more of a guards game this year. And if you need a guard in college basketball, Mark Sears would be one of the first guys I want on my squad, if not number one. But one of the things we've seen in recent years, we talk about those big guys, is that the best college players are not always the best NBA prospects. So I want to ask you now, who is your best NBA prospect in the SEC?
For me, it's Colin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. Again, just like the defensive versatility, his ability to pass, dribble, and maybe shoot. I think that's like the last little question there. But just his smarts defensively, how much ground he covers, his ability to make plays as a distributor, like, it's all there for him. And I have real questions about like what South Carolina is offensively this year. Last year, they found some success with BJ Mack as a stretch 5 and Murray-Boyles kind of inverting the floor from the 4 with his like mid-post back downs and using that to spray over the floor. This year, it's a little bit different because they added Nick Pringle out of Alabama, who isn't a floor stretcher. He's more of a guy who wants to sit in the dunker spot and just go tear the rim off. So I think that's a bet on Murray-Boyles finding his jumper. And you're going to look at the roster and be like 6'7", 230 last year. He's actually gotten a little bit taller this offseason. That's some of the noise out of South Carolina. And just the wingspan that he has, like, it's the perfect type of archetype of what you're looking for. Now, granted, he needs to shoot it a little bit better, but everything else he does just impacts winning on such a high level, and he's insanely smart. Like, his basketball IQ is through the roof, and that pops off on the tape like left and right.
I can't disagree with you. The one thing I will add is I think he surprised some people last year he's in the top of the scouting report from day one this year. He had, he went out to the NBA Academy, NBA Skills Academy in August, and he got rave reviews as one of the best college players there. He's being talked about as a potential lottery pick. So I totally agree with you. He's one of the top NBA prospects to know in the conference. But it's a lot different when everybody else is gaming for you and they're building their defense around that to take that next step. So that's going to be an interesting, he's certainly going to be someone that's going to be very interesting to watch all year. Listen, I want to talk a little bit about Trey Johnson, because this is someone who is a former number 1 ranked prospect in the high school class, has clear one and done aspirations. He's kind of a throwback style shooting guard and a tough shot maker, but he's got projectable size. He's got projectable length. We saw his physical tools really go to the next level last year as a senior in high school. And this is someone who is wired to score. So he's going to come in to Texas. He's a Texas native, and Rodney Terry is going to have to let him go a little bit, but there has to be a little bit of a common ground in terms of Trey finding an efficient way to attack within the flow of the offense, Texas letting him go, but also getting him some easy baskets, because the scouting report on Trey to date is like, when he gets hot, he can burn you, but he's going to settle for tough shots no matter what. I think he's got to find a little bit of a rhythm, playing with better players at Texas, obviously. What can Rodney Terry do to get him easy baskets and to make the game a little bit easier for him? That's all going to be part of it. But again, NBA level scorer with positional size, positional length, all of that stuff translates. But just like with VJ Edgecombe, this is not an easy thing to go into college with already this one and done path kind of already in front of you, regardless of what happens during the course of the year and everybody gunning for you. So I think this is going to be, Trey's going to be a really interesting one to watch this season.
I'm a little concerned about his rim rate last year. It was really, really low at the high school ranks. And
right. So,
Texas, every single team that Rodney Terry has coached since 2020 has had a shockingly low rim and 3 rate. Like, they just don't take shots at the rim and a lot of threes compared to their counterparts. And then I look at this roster, it's like, okay, Jordan Pope doesn't get to the rim. Arthur Kaluma is a little bit iffy on that. Tremone Mark loves to settle into, mid-range jumpers. And now we have Trey. It's like, there's some questions here. Like, the fit on this roster is going to be really weird because there's a lot of ISO monsters. And I don't know if your turn, my turn works in the half court, especially against some of these well-schooled defenses in the Big 12. And I think this is an opportunity for Trey to show he's more than just an ISO scorer. And he's going to have to be something different than what Texas has on this roster.
Well, and that's why I say they've got to do things to simplify the game for him. You've got to build in, get some back cuts, get him some rip throughs so he can get to the free throw line. But if you're coaching him this year, you've got to help him get easy baskets, because to your point, he is instinctively an isolation type player and a little bit of a ball stopper, and he's playing with other guys like that. So the coaching staff has got to, and I'm sure they do, they've got to recognize that, hey, this is the challenge of the pieces we put together. What can we do to kind of make this a little bit more of an easier transition and help these guys get some easier baskets?